between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It's Friday. That's right. It's Friday. It is January the 20-something. I don't know. I should have probably looked before I looked. I think it's the 27th. 28th. There we go. Close enough. January the 28th. This means we are 2 days away from Championship Sunday. AFC, NFC, the winners advancing to Super Bowl 56. And John, we have almost caught up to your age in Super Bowls. How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel old. It sure does. The first Super Bowl I really remember was probably Super Bowl IV, which was between the Vikings and the Chiefs, and that was in 1970. So I was like 7 years old. I remember watching that game, and then the next year was the Colts and the Cowboys, and that's when they rolled out that they were renaming the trophy the Lombardi Trophy. And then I started to learn more about Vince Lombardi, who's developed into one of my all-time favorites and kind of like an idol, being Italian-American and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be 2 years older than the Super Bowl until I expire, which hopefully isn't very soon.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully you'll be around for Super Bowl 50 or 156.
Yeah, maybe Aaron Rodgers will get to another Super Bowl. We'll see.
Yeah, well, hey, in 100 years, maybe his luck might change. No, I mean, look, I mean, we're getting pretty excited now that the obviously our rooting interests were both eliminated last weekend. So, it takes a few days for that fandom sting to go away a bit. I'm feeling pretty excited for this weekend. I think we're gonna get a pretty entertaining bunch of games, and hopefully, so again, whether that Kansas City Buffalo game. I mean, there was a lot to like about it, but at the same time, if you're kind of big in on playing defense, it probably wasn't that. I mean, do you like NBA All-Star games, John? I don't.
Actually, I do. I like the skill level, but I get your point. I mean, I still think the best game I've seen over the last decade, or maybe even longer, was Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl. I mean, not just because it was a Super Bowl, but that 28-24. To me, that's kind of like a perfect game. It's 24-14 going into the fourth quarter. The legendary quarterback wins his fourth Super Bowl. A team that was trying to repeat made some questionable calls down the stretch. To me, that was a sensational game. That's the best game I can remember in the last, 10, 15 years. Sunday night was exciting. I mean, but it did feel like an NBA All-Star game because, I mean, there were wide open wide receivers. And look, I love both Mahomes and Josh Allen, but I would hope that they connected on those open receivers because those guys, for the most part, were wide open. And I'm not sure what the defenses were doing. And then you have the questionable coaching decision by Sean McDermott not to squib kick or at least, pop it up in the air where if they make a fair catch, they're going to take over the 10, not the 25. So, yeah, I mean, it was exciting to watch. I mean, 25 points in the final 2 minutes of regulation, sure. But, I like those. I like a 5-4 game in baseball, not necessarily 1-0 or 12-11. Somewhere in the middle, to me, is kind of a fun game. Same thing in hockey, right? I mean, when you see a 3-2 or 4-3 game, there's a lot to unpack for that. When it's a blowout or this high scoring game, it's not quite as well played as say like the Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl.
Well, let's put it this way, and I'm glad you brought up hockey because one of the best games I've ever seen personally, and again, this is obviously my opinion, so there's I'm sure there's plenty of other great games out there, but one of the best games I've ever personally watched was back in 2011. Bruins Lightning,
I know what you're going to say.
Game 7, Stanley or Eastern Conference Championship. Eastern Conference, I almost said AFC, and I just completely, my mind just started, melting there for a second. It's early in the morning, John. You're going to have to bear with me here.
That's okay.
I lost my train of thought.
Okay, I'm back. I'm here. Lightning Bruins 1-0. It was just a phenomenal game. No penalties, so you didn't even have the really the quote unquote excitement of a power play. It was just a greatly played game with great goaltending, great defense, and that's the thing. It's like you don't need that high scoring of a game, certainly in hockey, and that applies in football too. And look, we're not saying that this game was was boring by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, geez, those last couple of minutes. I mean, I had no rooting interest other than teams that I didn't want to win, and I was still freaking out because I'm watching this game. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh my God, that was the greatest game I've ever seen." No, I mean, there's a lot of other great games, and obviously not necessarily involving the Patriots, but go back to Super Bowl 43, maybe Cardinals Steelers, one of the best
That
games
was a
I've
great
ever
game.
seen. Yeah, and
Absolutely, yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, it's just it's. I think we're going to get something similar, maybe not as down to the wire back and forth, but I think you're going to get a high scoring game between this Bengals and Chiefs team. But real quick, before we really dive into these two games, I do want to bring up some of the news of the last couple of days because, well, we did get some, and I want to ask you a question, particularly about the Broncos' new head coach and what it could potentially mean, John,
Mhm.
to your guy Aaron Rodgers. So, if you didn't see the news, they obviously made official Nathaniel Hackett is the new head coach of the Denver Broncos. Obviously, the former Packers offensive coordinator. Uh, the Broncos, you didn't even need to mention Nathaniel Hackett before Aaron Rodgers got connected to this team, even before this season started. So, in your opinion, first of all, is it a good hire? And second, is this kind of a foreshadowing of what's to come for this Denver team?
I think it is. And Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers have a great relationship. Hackett's been the offensive coordinator with the Packers the last 3 years, not the play caller. That's still Matt LaFleur. So there's that question. They also interviewed Luke Getsy, who's the Packers passing game coordinator, and maybe he becomes the offensive coordinator in Green Bay, and Rodgers gets along great with him. And I think Rodgers and Hackett, it's a good combination because Rodgers is kind of like the salty, aging folk singer, and Nathaniel Hackett, if you've ever seen any of his press conferences, seems to be the greatest guy in the world. I mean, and he commands a room. He's funny. I think he's got a really good presence about him. Now, I don't know if that translates to being a successful head coach. Many of the great head coaches weren't exactly, Robin Williams in front of a crowd. So I think that, we're going to connect the dots, obviously. And look, when this came out last April that Rodgers wanted out of Green Bay, the first team that you heard about was Denver. I mean, Mark Schlereth, who works in that market, former offensive lineman for 3 Super Bowl teams, Fox analyst, who I like a lot. I think he's very good. He was talking about it right away, and that he had some sort of intel on that. It kind of makes sense. Rodgers' fiance, if they're still, planning on getting married or whatever, is from that area. And could you think of a better NFL city for Aaron Rodgers to go to than Denver? Maybe the possible exception of San Francisco, kind of the earthy, crunchy type of place. I think it's a perfect spot for him.
I just honestly, I'd be looking forward to the South Park parody of it. That's all. I mean, I like it'd be coming if they haven't done one already. I mean, I'm a little behind on some of the newer episodes, so if they have done a parody of Aaron Rodgers, I have missed it. But certainly, if he does go to the Broncos, you would. I'm sure you'd be seeing that at some point. Yeah, look, I agree with you. I mean, it seems like not only from a it might be time to split angle, but the
Mm-hmm.
Packers might not really have too much of a choice. We've talked about their cap space and their situation going into next offseason. It might make financial sense for them to just decide to move on at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Anyways, other coaching moves: Chicago Bears. The Bears hired former Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. I love that name, by the way.
Great name, isn't it?
I love it. It's great. As their new head coach. I don't know if you have any strong thoughts or anything like that on that, but obviously you're looking towards being able to develop and make sure you grow with Justin Fields and that's just something that the Bears have failed to do with previous quarterbacks and something that is obviously going to be a pressing thing. So naturally they go with the defensive minded coach. I don't mind it necessarily. Like I said, I'm not so one side versus the other when it comes to which side of the team you want to kind of pursue your head coaches. Like I think you can get value out of both. I mean, look at the um, disparity in coaches in the conference championship game. You know what I mean? You get a lot of
Mhm.
offensive ones as opposed to the defensive ones we saw last week in some of the divisional round games. So, interesting move in my part. I mean, like I said, if you're a Bears fan, you just hope that you can make sure the development of Justin Fields continues to progress, and that's really the most important.
What you need to do is find a really good offensive coordinator and then rebuild the offensive line. Those would be the two big decisions the Bears will have to make. And look, the NFL has gone into let's hire someone who coached under Kyle Shanahan or McVay. And that's the case. I mean, just look last week in the NFC playoffs. You had 95-year-old Bruce Arians, and then you had three young dudes who all coached in Washington together back in 8-9 years ago when Shanahan was the offensive coordinator, McVay was a tight ends coach, and LaFleur was the quarterbacks coach, and there they are. So that seems to be the trend. I mean, even Zach Taylor's done a good job in Cincinnati, and he coached under McVay with the Rams. So I think what I always like to see is I'd like to see people hire a coach, a head coach, kind of like a general, right? Like a commander, someone who oversees the entire program, and then you fill it out with your coordinators. But it seems to be let's just get the hot offensive play caller. He's got the play sheet stuck in his face the entire game, and I don't even know what he's doing the rest of the time. Like look at Matt LaFleur, and look, I mean Aaron Rodgers was one or two in why they lost last Saturday night. I'm not trying to blame anybody else, but when they're on defensive special teams, he's cheerleading. He's like, trying to get the crowd pumped up like you're the head coach. I've never seen that before, right? I mean, could you just see like Greg Popovich or Doc Rivers or someone while LeBron James is at the foul line, like trying to get the crowd pumped up to make him miss a free throw? It looks kind of like unprofessional, and it's like, dude, you're the coach. You've got to be a little bit better than this. Like, go to the sideline, go to the bench and work on your special teams, which are putrid, right? I mean, are you the head coach or are you just essentially the offensive coordinator? So that's where teams are going. And I look, Belichick's the best coach in the business because he's coached all sides of it, right? I mean, he's been around forever. He coached special teams when he was young. He coached offense when he was young. Obviously, we know his mark has been made on the defensive side of the ball. But I'd like to just see someone who is actually a head coach who kind of is the general, right? The CEO that oversees everything. And the league isn't going in that direction. They're just going, okay, this guy was a hell of a coordinator, and now let's make him a head coach. And we know what the Peter principle is. Get promoted to become incompetent, and that happens a lot in the NFL.
Oh yeah, I mean, we see it with the coaching hires every season. It's just it's the same cycle over and over again. And anyways, last little bit of news here before we start talking about these games because I do really want to get into it. But everyone knew became official. Ben Roethlisberger obviously announced his retirement after 18 seasons. Obviously definitely a Hall of Famer. I brought this up in a discussion, not necessarily surrounding Ben Roethlisberger, but we were talking another quarterback. Maybe it was Rodgers. I don't necessarily know, but he's definitely a Hall of Famer. There could be a few things that obviously get in his way to becoming a first ballot. Obviously, his off the field stuff from earlier in his career may weigh, on some of the voters. I'm not entirely sure, but it could be. But
it's not supposed to, though, right?
No, it's not necessarily supposed to. But the biggest factor here, and this is something that's going to be interesting. I brought this up. Sometimes it matters who you go in with.
Oh, and absolutely.
Ben Roethlisberger may, I hope this isn't the case, maybe sharing the stage with another quarterback. And that could certainly hurt his potential because you have to take into account who else is going to be in that room. And when it comes down to it, are the voters going to sit there and say, okay, let's put in two quarterbacks? Well, maybe not, because maybe there are a couple other guys that are a little bit more deserving. And then it comes down to, okay, which quarterback? And that discussion will last less than half a second if it's anyone versus Tom Brady. So obviously that's not the case. We don't know that yet. Obviously, Brady would have to retire this offseason for him to be eligible the same year. But imagine this, John. Imagine Aaron Rodgers retires too. Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, all eligible in what would be 2027 for the Hall of Fame. I mean, I know it'd be hard to convince me that Rodgers and Brady, certainly Brady, wouldn't be first ballot. I mean, like I said, it could come down to you have to make a decision, and maybe Rodgers gets the short end of the stick, but I doubt that. But if you have all three of these quarterbacks, not all three of them are getting in the same year. You know what I
No,
mean?
it would be obviously Brady's a slim dunk, and I think Rodgers is pretty darn close to a slim dunk, especially a fourth MVP. He has won a Super Bowl. The efficiency and all of that. Then Roethlisberger would have to wait 1 year. Although the way I would always look at it, and I know the Eye Test podcast deals with this a lot more than we do because they know more about this with Clark Judge and those guys. But if you look at the total group of players that are eligible for the Hall of Fame, shouldn't it just be, well, are there three guys better than Ben Roethlisberger that played other positions? Like, why, like in baseball, I mean, as much as baseball screws this thing up, they don't say, you know what, we can only put one pitcher in this year because
no, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, but I think the point is there are a lot of very eligible players that have been waiting for a while. So that's.
But are they better than Ben Roethlisberger? That's my thing.
No, I think some are. I think some are, but unfortunately, you have a battle between. Look, the room's very dynamic. It has a lot of people. It has some people that have seen a lot of football. There's, people in that room that have seen relatively little compared to some of the others. So, you also have to take into account age differences, era differences, recency bias. How many people, for example, Willie Anderson, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's was a better? I mean, you can argue that he was better at his position than Ben Roethlisberger was, but
sure,
who the hell is going to sit there and argue that? So that's my point. So it could come down to a decision where you're like, okay, you see, a handful of quarterbacks. Obviously, Brady is going to get that nod, but I just threw that name out there because he's a finalist, obviously, this year, and he's a guy that plays a very unspectacular position in the minds of most, which is right tackle. Like, who the hell is going to sit there and have arguments on Twitter about right tackles? I mean, let's be honest. So, again, the perception may be that Ben Roethlisberger was better at his position, but the reality of it is you may not find a better player or more deserving player than a guy like, say, Willie Anderson. Like I said, I'm just using him as an example, and a little bit of bias because we've spoken to him in the eye test, and we've been advocating for him. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there's not there's not some a little bit of a push there, but it's going to be interesting, and it'll certainly be like I said, I hope this situation doesn't even happen because Tom Brady plays one more year and he kind of gets the stage to himself. I mean, he will regardless. He'll be the headliner no matter who's in the class with him. I don't care if it's Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and
no, he's the guy, right?
Exactly. So, but it'll just be interesting to kind of see where it.
I wonder if these guys speak to each other. I mean, this is just me being kind of a conspiracy theorist, but what the hell, we're doing talk radio, why not? Like, Eli retired after 18. Brees, Eli retired after 19. Brees retired after 20. Roethlisberger is retiring after this year. Maybe Brady plays one more year, retires after 21, and maybe Rodgers retires after 22. And it sets up nicely that every year you've got a quarterback. Now, you can debate whether you think Eli's a Hall of Famer. I think he's going to make it because of the 2 Super Bowls. Although Jim Plunkett has 2 Super Bowls and essentially the same one-loss record. It's just that Eli played longer. And Eli's Super Bowl wins are monumental. Even though he didn't put up a lot of points, he beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl if you want to go there. So, but maybe that's how it sets up. Like, I don't think, Tom Brady's getting a hold of Ben Roethlisberger today and saying, congratulations on retiring, but now that you're retiring, I'm going to stick around another year. I mean, Brady's the guy that pulls the card because whenever he retires, he's getting. Look, I think when Tom Brady retires, they should just waive the 5-year period, just put the guy in the Hall of Fame. Like, what are we waiting for at this point? Right? I mean, like, what's the? There should be that could be to me the way to really separate Hall of Famers is like as soon as the guy retires. I think they did this in hockey with Gretzky, right? Like,
yeah,
okay,
but
just put him in.
that should be so exclusive that it really only happens with one person, because you know how these things.
Tom
It
Brady would
just
be fine. Yeah,
well,
I'd be
that's
fine
what
with
I'm
Tom
saying.
Brady being that guy.
That's what I'm saying. But I wouldn't, because you know how it is. It's like, first of all, being called the greatest of all time used to mean something. Now it doesn't. I mean, not
No,
that
exactly. Yeah.
like the actual words don't mean anything. Obviously, being the greatest of all time does mean something, but you know, everyone gets called the goat, goat this, goat that. I mean, the goat of goats, two goats, and I'm just like, it drives me batty. I
Yeah.
feel like if I was a machine, I would just malfunction and shut down and just never cease to exist again. But
PETA should get involved with this, right? They should get involved with this. There's too much goat abuse.
yeah, exactly. That's one thing that I would support PETA on this one, but no, that's the thing. Like, you know how it happens, though. It's like, you know, if that does happen, eventually it's just going to get to a point where, like, oh, well, we should waive it for this guy and this guy and this guy, and it's
Right.
just like, all right, like, I think of, you know, to when he, you know, if he does retire. I mean, that's the one thing where it's like I could find some silver lining if he retired this year, because I would believe that he retired still as the best quarterback in the game, and that is something that is very. I don't know if it's ever been um, matched in any sport, really. Like, even the great of the greats. I mean, to retire at the very top of your game, and with a very legitimate argument as being the very best at your position, that would be very Tom Brady. Like, obviously, I mean, this is something that never gets talked about. Never having a losing record. I mean, the guy hasn't lost fewer
Right.
than 11 games, or fewer than 10 games since 2002. And like, even
Yeah. Crazy.
the crazy thing is, even in 2016, having played only 12 games, he's still won 11. So it'll be pretty nuts. But I'm gonna pump the brakes on myself here, John, because I don't want to get too far down this road, because I can talk about Tom Brady forever. But we do have a bunch.
Jordan did retire twice as the best player in basketball, right after '93, but then he came back, and then '98, but then he kind of ruined it by coming back.
Well, he was also far younger too. I mean, that I don't even compare the two, because like, I mean, how old was he the first time he retired? I mean, he was still in his prime, so I'm not. Yeah,
he was
like
30, and then he was 35, 36 when he retired in '98. Which, again, for basketball, that's pretty old. And then
that's pretty
he
old.
had 3 years off and come back. I mean, they're asked to do more than quarterback physically. So. But yeah, Kareem retired at 41, but he wasn't close to being the best player in basketball.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like I said, I mean, anyone who has this match type of longevity that retired at an advanced age. I mean, again, if you like, even say Andrew Luck, retiring at his age. I mean, he wasn't the best in the game, but like, that's still like, wow, like, you're that good and you're retiring now. That was shocking. Like, forget about Brady's age. If he retires this year, he will retire as the best quarterback in the league, and you're going to be like, I mean, that's quite the icing on the cake. And I hope I'm not trying to talk myself into this being a good time for him to walk away. But all right. You know what? Pulling the plug. We're done talking about Tom Brady. I got Joe Burrow up on the screen right now. Maybe a younger version of him. We'll just see. Look, just this
younger version of you, Joe Burrow.
Yeah, well, hey, like I said, I mean,
younger brother Joe.
As long as I get some benefit, maybe some, maybe some inheritance, I'll accept that, no problem. So, anyways, up on the screen, we just got a couple little stat cards here, give us a little perspective. 592 yards so far through 2 games, 2 touchdowns, 101 rating. Obviously, we know, you didn't have to, last weekend's game was kind of a slugfest, but it's going to be interesting to see how some of these young guys. And look, I'm not even, screw saying young guys. Some of these playoff novices, and by that I mean mostly Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford. How do they respond now in this higher expectation, higher stakes type of moment where you're 1 win away from a Super Bowl? And as we've seen with some even veteran quarterbacks, and I'm not going to name names, we're not doing that today.
Go right ahead. You can.
No, I'm not going to do it. But even with some
As my
veteran
friend said, we're in an
quarterbacks.
abusive relationship.
Even-
My friend texts me, goes, "You guys are in an abusive relationship."
Yeah, but
I'm moving to Denver with them.
Yeah, and, well, Lockside, you'll be hanging out. Well, you'll be chilling out in Denver. You'll have a good time.
I'll be his version of Jim Gray. How's that sound? Aaron, you moved to Denver.
Yeah, move to Denver. I was going to say, just be careful with the some of the things out there. I don't want to get. I don't want you to get a little bit unfocused there. But anyways, you got Burrow and you got Matt Stafford, obviously going up against two playoff veterans, and I say that with Jimmy G very loosely. But again, I the people knocking Jimmy G, that's why the quarterback position is so complicated, right? I mean, it's. Do we think he's a great quarterback? Probably not, but for whatever reason, he knows how to win football games. And, it's not necessarily, there's no, like in football, there's no mark that you hit that guarantees a win. It's not like, oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, individually, you will win this game. No, I mean, sometimes it's just about making the play at the moment at the right time. And if you can do that consistently, you're a very good quarterback. Again, I think calling him great is a little bit too much, but I wouldn't certainly call him less than average. Although again, anyone here watching on screen will see his stat card, so to speak, doesn't necessarily stack up to any one of these other quarterbacks. But focusing in more on this AFC Championship game because this is the one that's going to be played first, and we'll do like we did last week, where or maybe we didn't do this, and we did this on FPC NFL Sunday. I don't necessarily remember, but we'll talk about this game, and then we'll give our pick, and then we'll move to the NFC Championship game. But basically, you have Joe Burrow versus, of course, Patrick Mahomes, a guy who has been to the last two Super Bowls, has a Super Bowl in his pocket. On the surface, on paper, obviously the advantage goes to Patrick Mahomes. Obviously he's been here, he's done that. He's at home where unless he's playing against Tom Brady, he's pretty perfect. So it's going to be interesting to me first of all, how this Kansas City defense potentially plays without Tyrann Mathieu, because as far as I know, the last I saw, he is still in concussion protocol. And if he misses this game, that's going to be a huge thing, a huge storyline, certainly for a defense that isn't this isn't this elite defense that we saw in the middle of the season where they were kind of beating up on some, quarterback-less teams and the Raiders. This is a defense that's pretty good. It's okay, but it is certainly vulnerable and certainly vulnerable to big plays when Tyrann Mathieu's out. Add in the fact that now it's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and this could be potentially a big issue for this team. Now, again, they're certainly capable of matching offensively, but I don't know, John. I maybe again, and maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking, but maybe this Bengals team gives you a repeat performance from early in the regular season.
Yeah, just a month ago, Joe Burrow put up 34 points against the Chiefs. That was one of the most entertaining regular season games of the year. It was a poor performance by Kansas City's defense, and again, without Tyrann Mathieu, who kind of patrols the middle of the field. We saw what Buffalo was able to do last week, right? I mean, the middle of the field was wide open, especially on those final two drives that Josh Allen put together. So that's going to be a concern because I think with Joe Burrow, he's got three legitimate wide receivers. I mean, that's as good a wide receiver group as you see in the NFL. They can also run the football with Joe Mixon, which I think would be something they may want to do, maybe take the crowd out of a little bit, maybe slow things down. I don't think you ever want to get into this fast-paced NBA-style game with Kansas City because it's right in Patrick Mahomes' wheelhouse to be very productive in that situation. So, yeah, I mean, the thing that you would think of is that Kansas City right now seems to have found itself on offense. Mm-hmm. Now, Pittsburgh's defense was okay, not great. They hung 42 on them. Buffalo supposedly had a good defense. They hung 42 on them. So it's going to be tough to win in Kansas City now that Kansas City's offense is really rolling like that. And again, a month ago was a great game, 34-31 Bengals. I think the Chiefs will have all their attention focused on this.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you can't take credit away from the Chiefs, certainly for putting up that type of those numbers against, certainly against Buffalo. But at the same time, it's like the Bengals better be watching film on that game and realizing how how much and how many times teams kind of just screw themselves over. Like
Mhm.
why again go, we talk about the squib kick and everything like that. And actually I hate that I'm saying this, but Bill Polian had a great point on the most recent I Test for Two podcast. He said, look, with the squib kick and stuff like that, there are so many things that could go wrong in that
Mhm.
situation.
Yep.
The ball could go out of bounds. It could, there's a lot. And like best case scenario, say they fumbled the return. Basically, you're only losing 3 seconds because the clock doesn't start. You know what I mean? Until that ball
Right.
is possessed or touched. So a lot of things to go wrong. The biggest issue there was like they just gave Tyreek Hill a free release.
Oh,
That is just I don't care if you're number one defense across the board. That is just mind-boggling why you would do that. And right off the bat, it was what 19, 20 yards. That was it. I mean, pretty
mhm.
much at that point, the game was over, or at least you knew they were going to be able to get into field goal range. And if you didn't think so, uh, the Bills helped them out yet again by allowing Travis Kelce to do the same exact thing. So yes, the Chiefs' offense is explosive. It's dangerous, but you just got to stop making you got to stop making mistakes on defense, and not just mistakes. I mean, any team can make mistakes and have blown coverages here and there. I'm talking about just day one type of stuff. You're looking across the field at the arguably the two most dangerous weapons offensively outside of the quarterbacks on the football field, and they both happen to be playing on the same offense. So
Mhm.
how do you look at that situation and not say we need to put nearly 100% of the attention onto those two? And not only that, they do the exact opposite. They say let's only single cover them and not give them help. So it's like it's crazy to think that like the Bills could be walking into this game right now. Jose, I mean, I thought twice in the last minute that they were obviously going to be walking into the AFC Championship game. It just didn't work out. So,
They were
I
hugging on the sideline. I mean,
yeah,
with 13
I don't
seconds
blame
left,
them.
Josh,
I
I would
don't
have
blame
hugged
them.
them through it. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how do you go essentially 45, 50 yards in 13 seconds. Now, the beauty for Kansas City is they had their timeouts. So, but that should even make it look worse for Buffalo because they had an opportunity before the two plays to get their defense straight.
Yeah,
Right? It wasn't like there was like a jailhouse break where everybody's kind of running around. To me, this would be like if you had a 5-point lead against the Golden State Warriors, then you let Steph Curry take an uncontested three. You took the ball out of the basket, turned it over, and then let Klay Thompson take an uncontested three, and then you walk off the floor as a 1-point loser. You shake your head and go, how the hell does that happen? Well, you don't let the two best shooters in the
yeah.
league take uncontested threes. You don't let, and I'm right there with you. I mean, Tyreek Hill, is he Devontae Adams or Cooper Cup? Maybe not, but with the ball in his hands, he's better than
Yeah,
anyone. And
that
Kelsey's unguardable, but
well
you got to at least
that first
give it a
touchdown,
try.
before that drive to the field goal drive, he
Mhm.
caught that ball. Where I don't even remember exactly where he caught that ball.
Midfield, above
Midfield.
midfield.
He took it across the field to the sidelines, outran
Yep,
all pro safety. I mean, this is
yep.
what we're talking about. So like we're not trying to sit there, or at least I'm not trying to sit here to diminish, the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's great. But like, when I sit there and say last week, man, I think Josh Allen outplayed him. And look, I still think Josh Allen was probably he was asked to do more. He had to run. I mean, and he had to. I mean, some of the throws he was making without any sort of contribution from Stephon Diggs was incredible. So, like, do I think Joe Burrow could match that? Sure, and I think more so not because I don't think he's like I think he's talented. I think he has to grow more before he gets the job. I mean, look, you got to pay your dues. Josh Allen has. I think Joe Burrow is progressing towards that. I think he needs another year or so to really fine tune that. But I give him a little bit more of an edge because of the weapons around him. I mean,
Mhm.
Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, which defense do I trust more? Well, I don't know if I have an answer for that one, to be honest with you. And it's not so much that I trust Joe Burrow more. It's just I think I don't know. I'm getting the feeling that maybe this Bengals team is just this is just one of those magical runs to a Super Bowl that maybe, you know, pushes him past that, a growing young quarterback stage to be thrown right into the mix with Patrick Mahomes. Because think about it, John.
Sure.
If Joe Burrow goes out and wins the Super Bowl this year, all of a sudden, he's not too far off from Patrick Mahomes when it comes to
Yeah,
early
I mean,
career accomplishments.
it's only his second year, and let's not forget his first year ended with that gruesome
Yeah.
knee injury. I think you're going to see Joe Burrow get better even next year, right?
Mhm.
Because he should be, in theory, healthier. Now, I think a misconception of Burrow is that he can't run. He can run. Before his knee injury last year, he had nearly 200 yards rushing in the first half of the season. He's an athlete. I mean, I think he was all-state in basketball. So he's not just this pocket passer who, he gets sacked because I don't know if he's learned to necessarily, adjust his
that's part of the
line.
growth. That's part of the growth.
That's
there.
part of the growth. And maybe his offensive line is just bad, and if the Bengals are smart, that's what they address in the offseason. Let's get some, help on the offensive line to protect our franchise quarterback. But no, I love Joe Burrow. I mean, I've said this a million times, even while I was watching him at LSU. Of all the young dudes, he plays the quarterback position closest to Tom Brady. I'm not saying he's Tom Brady, but he plays the position very similar to the way Brady does.
That's the thing. He has a chance. He has a chance right now to beat Tom Brady. I'm not saying it, obviously him become. No, I'm saying he has an opportunity to do what Tom Brady does, and that is to elevate a team that may not necessarily be favored or even kind of in the realm of the team they're playing. But you know what? Guess what? He has an opportunity to do so. So this is where I'll ask you, John, before we close the show out talking about the Rams and 49ers. Does he do it? Do the Bengals walk into Los Angeles as the AFC representative, or are the Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl for the third straight season?
Chiefs are going back, and I think it's going to be kind of easy, only because the Bengals on defense have looked pretty darn good in the playoffs so far. But who have they faced? The Raiders, who I don't think had anything left after numerous overtime games and the way they got into the playoffs, and then Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill, being the only quarterback that played worse than Aaron Rodgers last weekend. This week it's going to be a different animal that they're dealing with. And again, that Kansas City offense is humming right now. So I would say that the Chiefs win this game by 2 touchdowns. I think it's going to be like a 38-24 type game.
Your lack of faith is disturbing, my friend.
And a younger brother,
yes.
And younger brother Joe Burrow. Oh no, I have a ton of faith in younger brother Joe Burrow. I just don't know if I have faith in the Cincinnati defense and the Cincinnati offensive line, because Kansas City could put pressure on the quarterback, and that's been a problem. That's seriously a problem. But again, and I love Burrow. Oh, I absolutely love him. I think he's he might be right there with Justin Herbert as my new dude. But I just think it's going to be tough to beat this Kansas City team the way their offense is performing.
Look, I think these two teams are like, I'm not going to certainly disagree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, obviously the Kansas City offense is humming, all that stuff. I think these two teams are very similar in a lot of ways, where it's, their weaknesses are, defensively, whereas their offense is a little bit high powered. And fortunately for the Bengals, they actually, I'm not saying they match them talent wise on offense, but they have maybe as close of a comparable offensive unit to the Chiefs. So I'm going to pick the upset because why the hell not? I'm getting crazy here. I'll take the Bengals and probably a very similar shootout type fashion coming down to the end. It's going to be like a 3, maybe 6 point game, but it'll be pretty close. So I'm going to take the Bengals. Go to the Super Bowl. I'm sure Joe Burrow will be pretty happy. And remember, Joe, always had your back.
Older brother Ian.
And when you hoist that Lombardi in a few weeks, we can have our moment where we call each other and I say, "We did it, Joe. We did it.
Yep,
we did it, Joe."
I was always there for you, Joe.
Yes.
At Ohio State, then LSU, and now
I just won't look as
Cincinnati.
fake as Kamala Harris when she did her.
We
did it,
Lord.
Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, we only got about 5 minutes left in the show, so let's talk about the NFC. Obviously, Matt Stafford is a guy that has had his share of disappointments being in Detroit for most of his career, but now in Los Angeles is one step away from the Super Bowl. And part of me wants to see them lose because I want to be right about Sean McVay, because I've been very, very, very critical of this Rams team. However, when it comes to beating an AFC team, I think the Rams have a better shot. Although it's hard to explain how the 49ers have just dominated this team. And going back to what I said about Jimmy Garoppolo, you see his stats on the screen right now in the playoffs, only 303 yards and no touchdowns. Like that, you look at that, you're like, how does this guy win? But again, it's not necessarily about, you know, what you it's when you do it in some of these games. And Jimmy just seems to come up in those moments at that time. So um look, all the pressure right now to me is on the Rams. The 49ers are kind of playing a little bit with house money here. They've kind of overachieved a little bit, in my opinion. But the Rams, this is the team that went out. They got Odell Beckham Jr. They got Jalen Ramsey a couple years ago. They went out and got Von Miller and all these names. Matt Stafford, I've already talked about him. These are the guys that are going to go win a Super Bowl. They have to win a Super Bowl because if they don't, they got nothing for nothing. Or no, I'm sorry, they got nothing for a whole hell of a lot, and that's not just money; it's draft capital and everything like that. So, um, I think the Rams win this game. I like.
Mhm.
I like it. It's tough to sit there and deny that. Okay, the 49ers have had this success against the Rams over the course of the last several years or whatever, and that's going to play a factor. They're 2-0 against them this year, but maybe that's just it. They've won two already this year, so the Rams are really due. And well, I'll give Matt Stafford credit. I mean, I thought he played a much better game than I thought he was going to against the Buccaneers. Um, didn't throw an interception, almost fumbled, late in the game, but
Mhm.
give credit where credit's due. He didn't, turn that ball over the way I thought he was going to. I just don't know if this is going to be maybe the 49ers are in his head type of thing, so it's not going to be as smooth as it was last week, but I still think the Rams ultimately pulled this off. So, in my opinion, it will be the Rams and the Bengals, Super Bowl 46 or 56.
That'd be interesting. I mean, obviously the Bengals haven't been to the Super Bowl since 1988. The Rams, of course, have been to three Super Bowls since then, two in St. Louis and one in LA. I like the Rams in this game. Again, the 49ers have won six straight against the Rams. Shanahan is 7-3 against McVay as head coach. Um, Shanahan, I think, is in Matt LaFleur's head. He's beaten him twice in the playoffs. Maybe he's in Sean McVay's head because technically McVay worked for him in
Mhm.
Washington, right? I mean, Shanahan was the offensive coordinator and McVay was the tight ends coach. I mean, you can make a case the tree is more. Well, the tree really is Mike Shanahan, Kyle's father. And he's produced an awful lot of really good coaches as well. And then before Shanahan, you go all the way to Bill Walsh, and before Bill Walsh, you go to Paul Brown. I mean, the thing is endless. But I think that the Rams. I like the way the defense has been playing. I mean, they kind of spit the bit late in the game last week, but again, that's against Tom Brady. We've seen, I don't know, 50 teams, 75 teams over the 20-year period do the same thing. So let's not hold it against the Rams. The amazing thing here, Ian, is I think the Rams are going to win by 10, 27-17. But, if you got the Bengals and 49ers in the Super Bowl, you'd have two 10-7 teams who didn't make the playoffs last year. It would be the third time the franchises have met in the Super Bowl. It would be kind of like, how the hell did this happen, right?
How did we get here?
How did we get here? I mean, I think the network would like to see Rams Chiefs. I mean, that would be the
Sure.
sexiest of the matchups, right? The Rams have become a glamour franchise because and then they'd be playing at home in the Super Bowl.
Well, think about that. You go, almost 60 years without having a home Super Bowl host, and then you get back to back 2 years in a row. That would be something. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Look, I mean, I hope I get it my way because then I'll have a pretty darn good Super Bowl, just relaxing and hanging out and all that stuff. And all of us Rodgers, Mahomes, and Brady fans can all just sit back and watch it unfold from the couch. But we'll see what happens. So. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this week. Quick reminder on Sunday, 11 a.m., we will be back for FPC NFL Sunday, of course, previewing these games as well. The quad group of us that does this every Sunday. And, of course, check out the YouTube page. Full press coverage, check it out. We're going to be really pushing that hard, doing a lot of great stuff over there. So if you're not doing it already, head over there, search in the YouTube search bar, full press coverage, and subscribe and like all of our stuff. We like when you like our stuff. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you on Monday.